Okay. All right, guys, welcome. I'd like to introduce Shane Olson. Shane, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wanted to bring Shane on here to meet you guys for a couple of different reasons. One of them is that he's obviously stylized character work, worked at Disney. He's kind of lived the dream, so to speak. And so I want to get in, look at the work, see what he's done, see what he did to get there, and kind of decode that a little bit for you guys. And then also, he has his own class and he's learned a lot about the business side of kind of sharing your knowledge, which, as you guys know, is something I am very, very focused on with you guys. Even though you're, boot campers and you're sitting here, you're learning this stuff. The most important thing you can do to get your brand out there, get yourself out there, is just sharing. Even just brushes. Is so crucial. So, Shane, awesome. Tell me, let's talk a little bit about what got you into this? Because you're down that Disney Pixar route. What got you into this?
Right. So, well, the story's kind of a long one, but
Huh?
I way back, I've always been an artist, kind of like most artists. They've been drawing all their lives, and I was absolutely set on being in the sign industry. So I thought I was going to open a sign shop and do signs back in, I guess, 1990, 92, something like that. Um, and then I saw an ad in the newspaper for a game tester. So I'm like, okay, I could do this on the side. That sounds fun because I'm into games. And I went and I talked to them. This was at Acclaim in Salt Lake City. But at the time, it was called Sculptured Software, and they did ports of Mortal Kombat to consoles. And I went and talked to them, and they didn't pay very well as far as a game tester goes. But I realized that they hired artists there. I'm like, you guys hire artists to do this stuff? And I'm like, can I talk to one of them? And so they obliged, and they went and grabbed a couple of the artists, and they brought them out to talk to me. And I was just enamored that they actually had artists as a career, a game career. And I'm like, how do I do this? What do I do? And they're just like, of course, the tried and true, go to school and learn this stuff. Well, at the time, there was nothing in Salt Lake City. There was this was around when Toy Story 1 first came out. So
Hmm.
uh, I was like, there's nothing in Salt Lake that teaches me how to do this stuff. And there was nothing like Ryan's online courses to teach me how to do this stuff. And so my wife at the time, she got a transfer to Seattle with AT&T, and I'm like, hey, there's probably something in Seattle, and there was Art Institute of Seattle. So I was on their guinea pig program,
Oh wow,
and I
for
went
for game
through
art.
and learned, yeah, for character animation.
Mm,
So I was studying to be an animator at first. So
yeah.
then I started to model my own characters, and it turns out that I like that better. But that was in 1997, 98 is when I went to school in Seattle, and I lived there for about 7 years. And then I came back here to Utah, and I worked my first job in the game industry at a company called Sapphire. And I worked on a game for the Nintendo 64 called Xena Warrior Princess. And it was a lot of fun, and I stayed there for a while, and then I ended up going back to Acclaim because Sapphire kind of went on hard times, ran out of money, typical story. And then I went to Acclaim, and it used to be Sculptured Software. So now it's kind of this full circle, and I'm working back at Acclaim, and I'm like, hey, I made it. I did what you said, and now I'm here.
Oh,
That was kind
nice.
of funny, but
Did
yeah,
did you see the
yeah. And
same people?
so I didn't. I couldn't remember who I had interviewed with because it had been several years, but it was just kind of ironic, and it was the same building, but now it was all kind of run down a little bit.
That's great.
But
But
yeah, but then
that's a really interesting point to kind of expand on a little bit, is just how you learn this stuff. And back in the olden days, all the old school people, I mean, pretty much, self-taught, even if you went to art institute,
yes, yes.
largely self-taught. So, what do you think are some of the key components for people that are looking to kind of grow their skill now? What do you think you really have to do to get there?
Well, it's education is taking a turn as far as this industry is concerned.
Hmm.
It's less about going to school and getting a degree, even though that's nice, especially if you're coming in from overseas. It's easier to get a visa if you have a degree, but portfolio is king. You know, that's how you get a job. You have to show your skills as an artist. You have to say, hey, look, I can do the job that you want me to do.
Right.
And so that is how you need to learn as much as you can as far as how to make your portfolio better, and learn what you need to know as far as what the companies are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't understand that. They're just like, well, should I do a personal piece? Should I do a realistic thing? Should I do this or that? It all comes down to what you want to do as an artist in this industry. Do you want to work on Call of Duty, or do you want to work on, like Ratchet and Clank or something like that?
Right.
And that really defines what education you should go after.
Was there a defining point where you knew what you wanted to do?
There kind of. When I first started out, it was kind of, everybody wears all the different hats. So I had to do rigging and animation and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of had to learn on the job from just, kind of books like yours. I was actually joking with you the other day saying I learned ZBrush from your book, but that's kind of what you have to do. You just have to search for the stuff that you need. If you need to learn Substance, you got to go find the education and learn it.
Right.
I don't know if that's what you're kind of after, but it all depends on, like I said, what you want to do. But the turning point for me was kind of when, I was an animator I also worked at Incognito after Acclaim. I worked at a place called Incognito, and they did Twisted Metal. And Twisted Metal is a very realistic game. And I was working on realistic characters, but I was animating them. But what I was doing is I was going home and I was modeling stylized characters on my own, just for fun, because everybody has their artistic bucket to fill. And if your bucket's not getting filled at work, then you're going to fill it at home, and how you do that is you just kind of pick whatever you want to work on, and that's what you do, your personal projects or what have you. And I just I would come home and I would see an awesome concept that I loved, and I would try to model it out, and I'd try to learn ZBrush that way. And that's kind of the turning points. And the whole Disney thing kind of fell into my lap a little bit as far as stylized stuff. I say that, but it's not entirely true. It's every single time I switched businesses, studios, I would try and apply to get onto Avalanche. And Avalanche is in Salt Lake City. And Avalanche, they're the ones that are responsible for Toy Story 3 and Cars 2 and Disney Infinity. And at the time, they were working on Tak and the Power of Juju, if any of you guys remember that. And they also were making a game called, I'm trying to remember. Blur Studios did a cinematic for it. It's Jabberwocky, the Jabberwocky. So they did the Tak and the Power of Juju, which Nickelodeon bought to make a television show out of. And that's what got Disney's attention. And then Disney bought Avalanche. And I wasn't quite working there at the time, but I came in through, they split the studio into two pieces, one called Fall Line and the other one called Avalanche. And Fall Line was intended to just work on Nintendo products only. So when I got in, I worked on Narnia and for the 3DS, and then I worked on Ultimate Band, which was kind of like a Guitar Hero Me Too sort of thing, but with Disney characters and stuff. And it was that was a lot of fun. But then they decided, this isn't really working out. Let's merge that company back into Avalanche, and then I became a lead character modeler on Jabberwocky. So that's kind of how I kind of got in through the back door, so to speak, a little bit. But that's just kind of how things work out sometimes. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I really wish Jabberwocky would have come out. It was a lot like How to Train Your Dragon with like humans and monsters and things like that. It was before that movie came out. It was very similar. So anyway, yeah.
Well, Cerie's got a question here. She's asking about,
Sure.
saying it's hard for her to choose between realistic and stylized. So, is there something that you find or have found, because now you teach you have your own class you teach, right? There at
Uh-huh.
3dcharacterworkshop.com.
Right.
And do you find there's like one trait that really defines somebody as, hey, I'm more on the stylized side versus the realistic, or do you yourself feel like this is something you could go back and forth on?
You can go back and forth, and people have. I mean, if you look at like Adam Scott, he just barely did a talk at the Zebra Summit, and
Mm-hmm.
he used to be, one of the realistic guys. Well, not used to be, he still is.
Yeah.
He hasn't lost that at all. But now he's working on Fortnite, which is completely stylized. And it's all about your anatomy knowledge and your knowledge of form and just how those things work together, because a solid base foundation for a character can definitely take you both directions. And it's just push. It's like a caricature. So you can either draw a portrait or someone, or you can do a caricature of someone, but they're both based on the same platform, the same solid base. So realistic and stylized kind of boils down to how much you like to do textures and how much you like to do realistic textures.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also realistic textures in the stylized realm, especially in film. Like if you look at like the latest Incredibles film and look at the textures there, they're very, very realistic, even though the characters are absolutely stylized. So, but in games, the texture work goes more towards realistic if you want to spend your time doing textures. And a lot of people like to do that kind of stuff. And then just like all the pores on the face and, learning how to do the tiny, tiny details like eyelashes and things like that. But the thing you have to realize is when you're learning how to do realism, uh, people tend to jump to the realism too soon, the details too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to not do that, to stay broad and bold and work out your anatomy and base shapes to begin with. And that'll come later. Details will come later. And that's something I find a lot of students tend to do, is just jump into the details really, really quickly. It's like, whoa, not yet.
Yeah, I had
So,
a
yeah.
teacher that had a really unfriendly way of saying it. Basically, you can't polish turd.
Yep, I say that all the time.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yep, not the friendliest ways.
so are you saying my piece is a turd? Where are we going with this conversation? Thank you for that critique.
Yep, yep.
But there you go.
It's so true.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is an interesting topic for me because one of the beliefs I have, and tell me what you think, but I think realism is stylized. Like any.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, good. So I want to qualify that and unpack that because I trained in the classical manner, sort of trained in the
Hmm.
classical manner, and the classical manner has an enormous amount of stylization to it, into the sense of like there is a process that you go through,
Right.
and it's almost like there's just stylized work. I don't know if this is entirely fair to say, but it's like stylized work just stops at that equation a little bit earlier, and then they just go down a different track of refining simpler forms, whereas we all start down the same track, and then the realism, they just go down towards now you're starting to talk about the superciliary arch of somebody's brow, um, where you're going to get realistic, whereas a stylized person, they're going to be more focused on the overall arc of the brow itself, and they're looking at just the curve as opposed to the anatomy of itself, but we're all developing along similar structural stylized lines. Does that make sense, or did I ramble?
Right. Yep. Yep. No, I totally agree. Yep.
So
And it's
how
just,
Yeah, sorry, you
go ahead.
you go, I'm talking a lot here.
I was just going to say it's kind of like a variable, right? It's like it's almost like a meter. I actually talk about this meter in my course. It's like how far do you push towards realism? And even realism isn't real,
Hmm.
like The Witcher, for example,
Oh yeah.
like you said, or like Uncharted or something like that. Those are very realistic characters, but they're not real, because you start going towards the uncanny valley. When you start getting too realistic, and then it just becomes weird. So you always want that, a little bit of stylization, a little bit of caricature in there, just enough to push away from that dead on realism, because it'll just feel weird. So that's what I was going to say.
Hmm. So what are some recommendations you have for people who are learning anatomy?
Well, there's your stuff, of
Oh,
course, and then there's Scott Eaton
yeah,
is one of my favorites.
yeah,
And I have one of his models sitting up on my desk here.
cool.
And oh, what is the I love Proko's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to proko.com, he teaches for figure drawing, but
Yeah,
the anatomy is solid and it makes a lot of sense
yeah.
to me. So it kind of goes along with it. Yeah, that's about. I mean, there's more. Anatomy for sculpting is very good. Yeah, just stuff like that. And I'm trying to put together my own module, but I don't know it well enough as well as you do. I always call you out. I'm like, Ryan's gonna kill me if he ever hears me saying this. This neck muscle, whatever it's called. That kind of stuff.
Nice. That's
During my
funny.
live streams, yeah.
That's great. So, okay, well, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when they go into creating stylized work? What are some of the just the big no-nos that really, show off that you're kind of, you're thinking about this wrong?
Okay, the one I see the most is symmetrical everything. So, like say, like a lower leg, for example, like the calf. The calf on one side, the apex of the muscle is a certain location, and the apex of the muscle on the opposite side is a different location. But if they're directly across from each other, it's like you obviously don't know your anatomy or what you're doing, kind of a thing. And then, just things like that. And there's also design that goes into it as well. Like a lot of people don't understand flow and rhythm and silhouette and straights and curves. You have to think about that stuff a lot more when you're doing stylized characters than when you're doing realistic characters, especially if you're given a 3D scan of someone. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of that is happening right now, where you'll actually be given a 3D scan of someone, and when you are given that, it's not just to clean this up. You have to kind of push the anatomy that's there and exaggerate it a little bit, because otherwise it's not going to read on the screen. It's not going to. So it's not just it's cheating just to speed you up, but it's not cheating in the way of you don't have to know anatomy now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's mostly what I see a lot of, is just like not knowing where the clavicle lives. I see that a lot, just like where it connects, and that gets. And then hands are the worst. So a lot of times, in my opinion, a hand is a character unto itself,
Yeah. Oh man.
and a lot of people just try and just kind of scoot past it. It's kind of like drawing. When you first start drawing, you like hide them behind your back or put them in your pockets or whatever. But when you're sculpting, you can't do that. They're out there on display, and if you don't know how a hand is built, then you're going to see it. And usually they make the fingers too skinny or too short, or the
Mm-hmm.
palm too giant, or the thumb in the wrong place or not angled properly. Those are kind of the common mistakes that happen, and that's what's kind of driving me to make this stylized anatomy module that I'm working on right now.
Good.
Because it's like, oh, we got to fix this. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys let me know, let Shane know if you think that'd be valuable. But I do think that one of the big gaps that we have in this industry is that nobody's gone and made the mental bridge from anatomy to aesthetic form. And
Yes.
how do you take a bicep and you turn a bicep into a curve of an arm, right? Because like if we're looking at your characters, there's Woody in the background. You know,
Oh, right.
how does
Are
a
you guys
bicep?
staring at this while I'm talking?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And on stylized characters like this, I bet I can find a better picture of this. Hold on a second. I'm spelling it backwards. Let's see. Oh, here's a black and white of all of them. So, let's see. Open image and tab. Here we go. Oh, it's really small. Gosh dang it. Sorry. Let me switch it to large images. There's one that's gigantic. There we go. This one. Okay. So this one, if I can zoom in, will it let me? well, maybe not. I should pull up some of these, but you can see that there's not a lot of anatomy happening here, like in Woody's arm right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I see it off on the left-hand side of the screen if you're watching this live, but otherwise we're just talking about a pose where Audie, I just said my son, my son's name, where
Nice.
Woody's tipping his hat and he's got
Okay.
his arm crooked.
Okay, thank you, Suri. So yeah, so you can see that it's just it tapers from the elbow down to the wrist, and there's not really, you know, all the forearm anatomy happening in here. And a lot of people, that is another mistake that a lot of people will make, is they'll think that they have to put the anatomy in there to make it actually function.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, this, like Randall's arms here are very, very straight. They're almost like toothpicks. You know, they're just square and straight. But the hands are based on anatomy. I mean, they have to function and they work a certain way. Particularly with Infinity, we did make sure the shoulders were in place, and those line breaks happen between the deltoids and, you know, the bicep and tricep. So there's a solid line, and then we would not only define the pecs, but we'd also define the rib cage on a lot of these too. And it depends on how they would bend and stuff like that. But and then sometimes the knees. But you can see how tapered they are, and they're not broken up. You know, like Mike's leg here is just straight, just goes straight down.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the only time you would see it bend is when he would actually bend his leg. So there's just little things like that, and that was kind of a struggle for us. Like, how much anatomy do we put into these things? And it also depends on the character too. You know?
Right.
Like a realistic, you know, from an action film would have more anatomy in it than, say, you know, like the duck here, or I should say the platypus, not the duck.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, get that wrong. But and when you look at early, like later on, we did Marvel and we did all the Lucas stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We had way more anatomy introduced. Like if you look at Maui here, see, you can see a lot more anatomy in here.
You see the elbow,
but we
you
still,
see the flexor group of the forearm, you see the extensor group.
right,
Yeah.
right, all that stuff.
You don't
Even
see
like
the
Spider-Gwen here.
sternocleidomastoid though.
Yeah, that's well, he's kind of a heavy dude too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like Spider-Gwen here, there's a lot of anatomy going on right here.
Oh, I'm excited for that movie coming up.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be awesome. But see how this hand is a character unto itself, and how it's posed.
Yep.
There's so much going on.
Well, actually, if we stop there, for those who are watching, we're looking at a Spider-Gwen Disney Infinity figure. And if we were to zoom in on that hand, I think what's really interesting is you said that the hands are characters in and of themselves. And if I'm looking at the structure of that arm, the arm has, let's say, 4 main components. It's got the ball of the deltoid. It's got the cylinder of the bicep. It's got a bit of a ball for the muscular portion of the forearm, and then it goes into, you know, it's actually pretty realistic part of the ulna and radius for the forearm. But
right.
But yeah. It's like that's 4 items, right? And then you get to the hand, and you're like, oh man, you've actually indicated, you know, the carpal bones. So you've got the trapezium and all these different muscles or bones of the wrist in there. Then it goes into the metacarpals. You know, there's multiple elements going on in that hand alone.
Yeah, it has all that stuff.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
And you've got to put that
and
gesture.
You'll notice that we omitted this knuckle.
Okay.
From all of the hands.
You did,
so
yeah.
All of the hands only have, and that just stylizes it even one step further. You know, they're just all, and then the thumb just has the one instead of this. You know, sometimes we make it apparent, like in this bend here, you know, that it's actually there, but only in some instances. But like the fingers, they only have the one. So, but this is also what I'm talking about here on this arm. The inside of the arm is like, I should switch it to green so you can see it, or blue or something. I thought I switched it to red. 1 second, it's on black here. There we go, lime green. Okay, so but this apex is like it usually is down lower, and this is up higher. You know, it's not typically straight across from itself, and a lot of students will get that wrong. They'll make their muscles like this. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like don't do that.
I love that you've done a humanitarian service for artists worldwide by removing that knuckle.
Yeah, it's fun.
Makes things easier.
Yep.
So, oops.
Anyway,
hit the wall. All right. So, anatomy is important, but it becomes a selective kind of conversation. So, when you're having that conversation of what anatomy do you put in and what you don't, how conscious is this conversation?
so well, with Infinity in particular, it was very, very, very conscious.
Okay.
Because that's part of the style.
Okay.
You know, omitting one of those knuckles, that's part of the style.
So is that like an actual meeting that you had? Or
yes, actually, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was art directed. So our art director was John Diesta, and then above him was Jeff Bunker. So both of them kind of directed this whole thing back and forth. And then there were 5 artists. Well, I should say 5+, because there were some off-site and there were some interns and a whole bunch of different people. But for the most part, there were 5 of us. And another thing that you can notice, it's kind of hard to see in this picture, and this one's too small. But maybe I can just talk about it. You'll also notice the lips are very undefined. They're super, super smooth. Even on the females, they're, you know, none of the extra anatomy underneath the nose. You know, the little valley. What is it called, Ryan?
Oh no, on the spot.
And the smile line.
The philtrum.
Yep, on the spot. There you go. And the smile lines coming around here, omitted, unless they're on older characters. You know, that will instantly age up your character by adding that stuff. Eye bags, things like that. You'll notice for most of the characters, they either have a very small lower eyelid or none at all, and that's another thing we had. And then just like I said, very, very, very smooth faces. Even on Wreck-It Ralph, which is very smooth across here, and his chin is very smooth. There's no cleft or anything like that. There's nothing happening except for very smooth. And you'll notice that across almost all the characters. And some of them have a little bit more of a bottom lip defined, but most of them they're just not there. You know, it's just kind of a cut.
Well, let me ask you this.
Called for it.
Are stylized artists just lazy? You know, why don't they put more in there? What's the deal?
Absolutely not. It has to do with appeal.
Yeah.
And it has to do with lighting, how the lighting acts and hits. If we were to put lips on all these characters, the appeal value would go down substantially. And we tried, and it did. Especially with the ladies, you know, because the ladies, you know, they want to have the luscious lips, as it were. Even with a lot of them, we would omit it. So it's really interesting to me how, and I learned a lot from like John Diesta and Jeff Bunker and those guys, and talking about all of that stuff and how we would just, I mean, even her lips, you can see that, let's see, they're just not really much to them, you know. But you still have the shadow breaks and the cheekbones and the nice face shape and stuff like that. But there's not much ear anatomy. It's just kind of, you know, the typical cartoon stylized thing. And then the hair is I don't even know how you'd call it, very geometric, you know, chunky. We'd call it chunky hair. And that's part of the stylization that we would do too. And sometimes they would have 3 fingers, sometimes 4, depending on the character. This one was done by Christopher Wright. He did a fantastic job on her.
She's got 4 fingers.
You'll notice, like, yeah, she does.
No, 1, 2, 3. Okay, good.
You'll notice the line of action through here.
Yep.
Yeah, just the sweeping forms and all of that stuff.
So Ree's asking, what was it like having toy production in the video game pipeline?
That's a fantastic question. We were not toy makers.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't, you know, we were game creators. And we're like, well, I guess we're making toys now. They were thinking about outsourcing it to a toy company, but what that would do is that would put the toy manufacturing out of our control. And we knew what we wanted. We were all geeks, and we were all toy collectors. You know, we had our desks full of toys from other companies like Sideshow and stuff like that. And we were just like, all right, well, it could be dangerous, but it could be good. And it actually was good because we didn't know what we didn't know. So we just went for the moon. And, you know, some of it we paid for, and some of it was better. And it actually turned some of the toy manufacturing at the time on its nose, because they weren't used to the kind of quality that we were after. They were after cheap and fast and that kind of stuff. And we're like, no, we can't have cheap and fast. We need it to look good. So, but at sometimes at the expense of the quality of the toy, meaning, for example, Helen, her neck being this size, her head would get broken off in kids' hands very easily. So, you know, we didn't know what we didn't know until it was too late. So she shipped this way, and her head would come off easily, and so would Violet's head. Until we could do running changes where we could say, oh, we better attach her hair to the back of her back in the toy manufacturing. So we did that, and then so later renditions of it weren't as weak as far as coming apart. So then we learned stuff, and that's how we would do it, and we'd just fix it. So yeah, it was a very interesting time, and we were even so interested in the toy quality that John Diesta and Jeff Bunker and Chris Wright, all three of them went out to China to oversee the manufacturing process to make sure it was good. Because for some reason, they like to not line up the eyes correctly, and they would be either cross-eyed or wall-eyed. And we're like, no, they have to be correct, you know? So.
And were they hand painting those eyes, or?
They would use stamps.
Okay.
So they would line up the model and use stamps, and it would come down, but they wouldn't line up the stamps properly. I mean, it's really easy to line them up, but they just weren't doing it properly. So yeah, they're like, line these up better. And they did, and they worked out. So
now, if somebody, if one of the students wants to do this for a living, do this for a job, and start to work in stylized, what are some of the things that you recommend? And you know what, let's do this actually. What would be, I always like to think a minimally viable product, even though my business is far from minimally viable. What is the minimally viable thing for somebody who wants to do this for a career? They want to get out and work at Disney Infinity, or work their way to Disney Infinity, so they'd work at, you know, some company to do there. What do they need to have in their portfolio to show that they can qualify, that they can do this?
No, it's a great question. It depends on where you want to go with stylized characters. You can go into illustration, you can go into games or film, or even collectibles like this. So first of all, you need to kind of make up your mind as far as where you want to position yourself in the industry. Then say you wanted to be in collectibles, then you would need to start thinking about manufacturing and how these things get manufactured and how they get molded. And you would want to start to learn how to be able to split your model apart and get it keyed and things like that. And the benefit to that is you only need to know how to make a high-res character inside of, say, ZBrush. You don't need to know how to do a low-res character for games or film or anything like that. But if you want to take your character into a game or a film or a television show, you'll need to know how to retopologize your character and how to bake the maps from one character to the other. And when I say one character to the other, I mean the high-resolution character to the low-resolution character. And that is something you absolutely need to show in your portfolio, because if you don't, just ask Gavin Golden from Insomniac Games, you will be looked over like a bag of garbage. You know, it's just like, I don't see what I need to see. I need to know that you can do the work. That is what companies need to see in your portfolio. So if you're just going for high resolution illustration, it's crazy to me, because when you look at ArtStation, that's most of what you see is just very nice renders of high resolution characters, which in my opinion won't get you far.
Yeah.
It will only get you likes on ArtStation, which is fine, but it won't get you work. So if you're going into illustration, which is a very narrow portion of the industry, that's fine, and that will get you there. But if you're going into collectibles or you're going into games, that will not get you there. You have to do, show the splitting and the keying, or you have to show the low resolution characters. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And do you have any examples, anything you'd recommend, portfolios that you think really shine for that kind of thing?
Not
to put you on the spot.
I'd have to kind of go dig. There are several.
If we look at your portfolio.
Okay, yeah, mine is not really set up for that.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably the closest one. This is the character that I walk you through in my course. But this is a really nice way of showing off a game characters with Marmoset Tool Bag Viewer.
Mm-hmm.
And you can spin around the character like this, and it's lit, very well lit. And this is a low resolution character ready for a game. So you can click on this right here. And yeah, somebody said it reminds me of a game I used to play. It is actually a fan art from No One Lives Forever. That's what it's from. So, and what you'll want to show is very, very clean topology, very low resolution with the maps that you need to show that your maps are actually working. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to show like your gloss maps and your reflectivity maps.
Mm-hmm.
This is all the stuff that they want to see. Your color, and then everything together, of course. So yep, No One Lives Forever. That's what it's from. And then you can also swing the light around in this. But it's really fun to see how far you can push the low resolution models. So how big is the map? The map is 4K for the entire figure, not including the gun.
Got it.
And that's pretty typical for the industry. It's sometimes when you get into film and stuff, you'll hear the word UDIM, and UDIM is basically your character cut into several different quadrants, and it depends on how big the character, how many UDIMs you get. I've never worked in film, so I don't know that side of the industry as much, but this is just one 4K map that way. So, and then you'll of course want to show your final renders. This is a key shot render. And then the original concept was done by Josh Black. So
how?
Yeah, this. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, students always ask the question like, "Can I just work from other people's? Do I have to get permission?" What's your line on that?
Oh, that is something I tell my students. You absolutely should get permission if you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nod to the original artist, and usually they're excited if you say, "Hey, I love your art. Would you mind if I modeled this up?" And then you can send it to them on your way and say, "Hey, this is kind of where I'm at. What do you think?" And 9 times out of 10, they'll give you some feedback, kind of like an art director situation, unless your model completely sucks, which happens. And then sometimes they won't respond because they're trying to be nice and they don't know what to say. So you'll just get into that sometimes. I get into it too. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, I don't, this is going to take me a while to respond to this. But anyway, it's just very, very healthy to get the original artist's permission to do that. Like this one I did during my live streams. This one, and you'll notice I always call them out. Every single image that I do. It's modeled and rendered by me, but that's based on a concept by Johannes Helgeson. So yeah, it's just, and when you do stuff like that and you reach out, there's a good possibility that they will share it on their networks as well if they like what you've done, and you're doing them a service instead of, if your model's good. So anyway, this is one of my streams that I'm barely blocking this character out. So I like to put stuff like that on here too, just to say, hey, this is my work in progress stuff. So anyway, this is not a game character. This is just a render.
Okay. And
go ahead.
So I was gonna, I want to talk a little bit about the job and
Sure.
the job of doing this. So you said that you can go in the collectibles, then you don't have to learn the low res, or you go into the stylized games and things like that. So if somebody wants to if they want to work in the stylized game if they want to work in stylized game artists, like let's just say be a character artist,
Sure.
you're saying they've got to produce the work, right? This industry, they don't care if you went to Harvard. You got to show you can do the work, right?
Right. Right.
And so, what's your feeling on the sustainability of this job? Is there any kind of age restrictions or limitations, or this job in general, and getting into it as a career choice? What's your feeling on this
Right.
now? Because we've grown in this industry quite a bit, and I like to tell people that
Uh-huh.
it can be a competitive landscape. But I was just looking back through several of my artists and in my boot camps, and it's like Corey and all these guys, character artists. They're getting
Hmm.
jobs.
Right. Right. So just be very, very flexible and be willing to move if you need to. I've been lucky somewhat. So I've worked at 6 different studios during my career, which is a lot. And it's kind of like the film industry or even the music industry. If you're not putting out the hits, you're playing bars, right? So there's the industry is very up and down as far as success, and no company is safe. I mean, for example, Disney. I worked for Disney for 10 years, which is kind of unheard of in this industry, um, until it went and got bought by Warner Brothers. And I could have stayed if I wanted to at Warner Brothers, but I chose to do something else just because I wanted to have something different. And sometimes those choices are up to you too. And you'll also notice there's a lot of news coming out of companies that are closing, like Telltale Games. Yep, Telltale Games just closed, and so did what's the other one? Anyway, it's a rock star industry. It's you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to move. You have to be willing to kind of change your portfolio based on where you're trying to apply as well, right? So you can see, I mean, most of this is stylized in my portfolio. I have stuff that I have not posted on here because I want my portfolio to look very stylized, and people look at this and say, oh, hey, I can see what you do. This is your stuff. If I started to propagate some other things in here that were more realistic, people might go, I don't know where you're at or where you're coming from. So, but what I was going to say is, it's a little easier when you're in a place like Austin, Texas, or LA, where the studio density is higher. So if you were to get laid off or let go or something like that, you could move maybe just in the same city or the city away, maybe commute and not have to move and work in the next town or something like that. With Utah's kind of unique because there's a lot of talent in Utah. So studios in LA or in New York or something like that, they'll come into Utah and they'll see a company that already exists, or they'll make a new one, and they'll start this company and say, all right, we're gonna do a satellite here, and it'll be an extension, and they can make some product for us. And they'll make some product like Disney Infinity, Toy Story 3, stuff like that. And then they'll go, you know what? Our budget isn't looking so good. So what's the first thing we're going to cut? Well, there's the satellite studio in Utah. We should cut that out. So that's the first thing to go. So that's something unique about Utah that kind of sucks, to be honest. That's kind of how every single studio has ended up that I've worked at. Like Sony owned Incognito, and it got cut off, and Disney owned, Avalanche, and it kind of got cut off. Just stuff like that. It's just kind of a repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's safe, but a little volatile at the same time,
Got it.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so Sri is saying just have a clear vision in the portfolio is important.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So
I mean, if you're gonna
go for it.
just one thing, not only realism and stylized, but also if don't have a whole bunch of environments in there or props or cars. If you want to do characters, do characters. If you want to do cars, do cars. Don't. It's nice to have versatility, especially if you're trying to apply for an independent company like indie dev. Like when you're trying to go for a small company that wears a lot of hats, they want to see that you know how to do more than just characters. So if you're trying to do that, then do it. But if you're trying to get into a larger studio, like DreamWorks or any of those, NCSoft, any of those kind of big corporations try and really focus down and say, nope, I'm a character guy and I'm a stylized character guy. So then they'll know exactly who you are.
Got it.
There you go.
All right, great. So I want to switch tacks here because I also
Okay.
want to get a moment in. And do I have Rashid? Rashid, are you in here? Yes. Okay, good. I want to make sure I get some time for you to just take a quick look at some people's work. But the last thing I wanted to talk on before we switch over to that, and this is the last part for the podcast audience, is the work that you're doing, the online classes and the sharing of resources. You have a brush set that you share, things like that. So what's been one of the biggest impacts of kind of committing to giving back and creating classes and Gumroads and, all that different stuff?
So yeah, it's interesting because when I started, I was just looking for some extra income on the side. And digital tutors reached out to me when they were digital tutors. Now they're plural site.
Yeah.
And they're just like, hey, can you do a couple tutorials or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll try it, And I really, really enjoyed it. So I made like 4 or 5 for them. And I realized, hey, you know what? I could probably do this on my own and have more control. Because one thing they did was they didn't like accidents. They didn't like seeing me make mistakes. And I thought that was a disservice to the student.
Right.
I wanted to show students how I could get out of the hole that I dug myself into. I think that's more, most important. It's like because you're inevitably going to get stuck somewhere, somehow. And if I can get stuck and I show you the way out, then I'm going to show you the way out too. Right. So I wanted that control, and I wanted to be able to get myself out of the holes that I'd created. So that's when I first made my Gumroad. I have one Gumroad course that is, it's like a frog. Hold on a second. Gumroad. Let's see if I can find it. It's been up for a while. So let's see. So it's just this thing, 20 bucks. This little, I made it a long time ago. I think it's been out now for like 4 years or so, maybe more. But people enjoyed this. I really liked just making this frog, and I enjoyed that too. But I'm like, I think I think I can go bigger, and I want to put something together that I could give people that's kind of like that would show them the entire process. The frog is just kind of like I was tired of showing. This is how you make this character. This is how you make this character. Even though I show you as an example with this Kate character. I use her as an example as I walk you through it, but I don't have my students make her. I'm just showing you how to do it with her, if that makes sense. I want you to make your own character. So I decided to just put together a course that walks you through it step by step, A to Z.
And what's that done for you in the industry? Like, has it changed your profile? Has it helped you get jobs or any of that stuff?
Yes. And it's kind of crappy because I have to turn them down because I'm focused 100% on this course now. So people come to me and they're like, can you do this? And unless they're very, very high profile that will help, my credibility and put it back into the course, I turn them down. So when I talk about that, that means, did I close my art station? I think I did. So recently I did a character skin for Overwatch. So I did this character skin, and because it was very, very high profile, and I knew that if I did that, people would be going like, oh wow, you did that. So and I also learned a lot when I did it in as far as texture work goes. So I can now take that knowledge and put it in the course. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. I'm working on some texture additions to the course and some anatomy additions and things like that. It's constantly being updated. But it was crazy. This year's ZBrush Summit, I was there, and just the notoriety that I have now, like people knowing who I am, is kind of weird. And I like it, but I don't think I'll ever get used to it. So I enjoy it, but I don't know that I'll get used to it. But it's really, really nice seeing students of mine like come up and say, oh, I love your instructions. and you helped me get a job, and this and that, and it's really nice. So that's like, yeah, it's really nice. Like I did this. If you go to my main page here, back to 3D Character Workshop, I just made this video, and I can't get through the video without breaking down. I get emotional talking about it, just talking about the student successes and all the hard work that they've put in and stuff like that. So I haven't really announced that I've put this video up here yet. I'm going to announce it at the end of this week. I just barely put it up like Sunday, I think it was. So this is new. But yeah, these are my brushes. If you go here, you can see this is my free brushes. And it's really crazy. I kind of look for it now. I look at people's ZBrush interface to see if they're using my brushes. It's kind of a fun little little puzzle thing.
Yeah, yeah, I do that too. Like the anatomy, I almost forgot my anatomy figure was actually there, still shipped with ZBrush.
Oh, yeah.
And I see people using that all the time as like a base mesh or for their face, or like Flip Normal had some tutorial on the face and they were using, that face. And I was like, oh, wow, God, it's still there. I was expecting Pixologic to kick it out at some point.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's a fantastic model. I've studied it myself. It's really, really nice.
Cool. Yeah, I worked my butt off on that thing.
Oh, I think that's when I first met you, was when you were putting that together during, was it Comic-Con? I think you were working on that at Comic-Con, and I walked up and talked to you about it. I think that's what you were working on.
That's all a blur those days.
Yeah, that's fun. But down here.
Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, down here, a bunch of students, the student galleries. So last year and this year, and yeah, so it's fun to kind of show those off. And I think it wasn't. Yeah, I got to get it working. So for some reason it broke last night. I gotta make sure it's working, because it pulls these from Facebook and populates it, and for some reason it just stopped working.
Nice.
So, anyway.
All right. Well, Gregory had a question, and I'm going to read this in two parts. In creating content for children, how do you balance the character theme? So he was referencing Venom, because it's dark and grisly. So how are you making that suitable for children?
Well, if you see this Venom, now this wasn't designed by me, it was only modeled by me, and then somebody else actually posed him. But basically just making the shapes big and bold, even though they're pointy teeth and things like that. He's not really that scary. I mean, he is, but he's kind of the size of Hulk, and he just has big, bold design shapes like this spider on him and stuff like that. But that's kind of the biggest thing, is to take away all that, the slimy detail that Venom usually has, all that yucky crap, and just kind of clean him up, made him smooth, and made him a bit relatable. Also, during the animations, when you're playing as Venom, he's just really fun to play as, and he doesn't do like dark animation, like anything like that. He's just kind of just one of the Avenger kind of guys, just running around doing his thing. So I don't really know what to say other than that, as far as just big, bold shapes and simplify and make him not so crazy, Yeah. And you'll notice he only has 3 fingers, and he doesn't have any nails. It's just his fingers are sharp, And then everybody said he kind of looks like a rat, because he has these two big front teeth.
Oh yeah, now I see it. Uh-oh. Once you see it, that's it.
Yep. But it's crazy, because it got a scary bunny, but it got the attention of like J. Scott Campbell. This design really stands out, because I don't think Venom's ever been done this way. If you see, Venom, like in the brand new movie that just came out, or on comic book covers, he's really just a blob with teeth, and this gigantic tongue. So, this was, I'm trying to remember his name. I keep saying Humberto Ramos from Mexico. He was in town visiting with us, and he kind of helped John Diaz to come up with this design. He just kind of sketched him out on a napkin. He's like, what if you do something like this? And then John took it and kind of pushed it further.
Nice.
So, yeah. Every one of these characters has a story. It's really cool.
All right. Well, let's
But
get ourselves looking at some artwork. But last minute notes for the podcast audience, people later on. What one of the things I like to do, and it drives what I do at the boot camp, is I have this belief that it's the primary job we have isn't necessarily to become great artists, because for me that's like the last frontier. It's like you could spend your life there. But what are the things that help people? Like, there are things that help people get a job. There are triggers that say you're a professional, and there's triggers that say that you're an amateur. So I want to end this on just a little note of like, what are 2 triggers that tell you somebody is not quite pro enough for the job yet? What are 2 distinct triggers when you look at their work and you're like, yeah, you're not there yet?
Now it's very, very hard to put a pin in, but it's appeal. A lot of people, they struggle to get that appeal, and an appeal is very undefinable.
Yeah.
But it comes down to just that artistic eye and how to get there. So there are two things that you need to know as a professional. And the second one is, and it has to do with networking, and it's being able to be art directed as an artist. You need to leave your personal, your personal whatever in the closet and just bring your professional attitude when you come to work. Because when you get art directed, it's not a personal attack. And if you take it as such, and that starts to travel, because the industry is very small, and you need to be a professional when it comes down to art critique, and shake your head yes, or say, maybe if you disagree, you can say, well, what do you mean? Can you define that a little bit more? What are your thoughts behind that kind of thing? But mainly it's like, yes, and then you change it. You change what they're asking you to change, because that's what they're paying you for. Also, if you're handed a concept, you need to nail that concept, and that's something that a lot of new character artists don't understand, because they're just like, well, it's kind of based on this concept. And it does depend on how far the concept has been taken. Because some of them are just a sketch, and you have to kind of sculpt from just a sketch, and that's something else. But if a concept has been taken to as far as it can be taken, and it has been approved and paid for by the company, and they hand it to you, and they expect you to model it in 3D, the closer you can come to that concept, the more valuable you are as a character modeler, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you'll hear in the industry if this person is good at accepting or taking critiques very well or not. So that's a thing.
Got it. Okay, that's good. So when you're getting the feedback, just shut up, listen, and it's not personal.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, guys, there we go. Shane, man, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about stylized and all that good stuff. I really appreciate you coming in. I know you're a busy person. This business keeps you busy. So.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. Have an amazing day, guys. Have an amazing night. And Shane, again, thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.